Traditional takeaways can be expensive for us and the planet. This Sustainable September, 3 dietitians from our BDA Sustainable Diet Specialist Group are showcasing tasty fakeaway options for members to try at home. Watch to see how they switch ingredients to make them nutritious, delicious, and more environmentally sustainable.
Hi, I'm Sam, I'm a paediatric dietitian, and today I'm going to be cooking a tofu katsu curry with British quinoa. So first we're going to be making our flax egg, and to do this we're going to be taking 2 tablespoons of the ground flaxseed, popping that into a bowl, and then measuring some of our oat drink, about 60 mils initially. And the whole point of this is when we mix the oat drink with the flax seeds, it's going to thicken up. And we're going to use this with the tofu later to coat it with those lovely panko breadcrumbs. And the idea is we're going to set this aside for about 15 minutes, and that should give it a chance to thicken. And now we can get on with the katsu sauce. So here I have my frying pan on a medium heat. It's really good to choose one that's slightly deeper because we are going to be cooking the sauce in this frying pan. I'm going to add about a tablespoon of rapeseed oil to my pan. Now, rapeseed is a really good choice. First of all, rapeseed is grown in the UK, and it's a great source of omega-3 fats as well, which, as we know, can be lower on a vegan diet. Now, to this oil, we're going to add our chopped onions. And these are going to fry for a few minutes. So traditionally, in a katsu curry, you would use something like chicken. And today we're using tofu instead, which is a much more sustainable option. And now it's time to add our garlic, our crushed ginger, and our carrots. So here I have about 1 inch of grated ginger, about 4 cloves of garlic here, and then about 2 carrots that have been chopped into cubes. It's important that we chop these quite small because otherwise they won't cook well. And the idea is at the end of this dish, we're going to pop our sauce into a blender and it will thicken up really, really well. So in terms of sustainability, plant-based options typically have lower emissions compared to their animal-based counterparts. There are some concerns about soya and deforestation, and tofu is of course made from soya beans. But the majority of soya grown on the planet is actually for animal feeds. And if you're purchasing things like tofu from the supermarket or any other soy products made for human consumption, they're usually grown in areas such as Italy or Canada, and they're sourced from sustainable sources. This has had about 5 minutes now, so it's time to add the spices. Here I've got 1/4 teaspoon of turmeric and 1/2 teaspoon of garam masala. That goes in there. I've got about 1 tablespoon of mild curry powder. And we're going to fry that off for just a minute. Make sure the spices don't burn, because you don't want your curry tasting bitter. The great thing about this katsu curry is you can steam any type of vegetable alongside it. So you can follow the seasons in terms of what you choose. Now we're nearly done with our sauce. Next step is to add our tomato puree. There's about 1 tablespoon there. Our mirin, which is a sweet rice wine type vinegar. If you can't find mirin, that's fine. You can use maple syrup instead.
You can add 1 tablespoon of soy sauce.
And finally, we've got about 500 mils of vegetable stock. We're going to leave this now for about 15 minutes to simmer. And you'll know it's done because the carrot will be fully cooked. Now we're going to bread our tofu. If you want an easy life, the best thing to do is choose a firm or an extra firm variety, which are most of the ones that we find at supermarkets these days. But if you do get a softer set tofu, like a medium set tofu for instance, you will have to press that first with a tofu press, or the old-fashioned way with plates and books. And one of the great things about tofu is not only is it an amazing protein source, it contains all 9 essential amino acids in adequate amounts, it's also a brilliant source of calcium for vegans and plant-based people. So this is the fun part. If you've got kids, get them involved because it's really good fun. So first we're going to take our tofu and pop it in the flour. Now make sure that's really, really well coated on all sides. And then we're going to dip it into our flax egg. So you can see it's thickened quite a lot since earlier. And the great thing about using flax seeds is they're a really great source of omega-3. And omega-3s can be lacking in plant-based and vegan diets. So by adding this to the oat drink, we're increasing the amount of those essential fatty acids in the recipe. Now after it's in the flax egg, we're going to pop it into the panko breadcrumbs. You can see you can coat it really, really well. Get it nicely covered. And then once that's covered, pop it onto a plate. And now it's time to cook our quinoa. And to make quinoa is super easy, just as you would do with rice really.
Now for each person you'll need roughly 1/3 of a cup of quinoa to 2/3 of a cup of water.
And if you want, you can fry it off a little bit beforehand. You get more of a toasted flavour that way. And we're going to let that reach the boil before I then cover it with a lid and let it simmer for 15 minutes on a very, very low heat. Rice is the usual option for a dish like this, but one of the issues with rice is it uses a lot of water in the growing process and releases a lot of methane gas as well. So quinoa is a really good substitute for rice. But again, one of the problems with quinoa is it tends to be grown in South America, so deforestation is a concern, and also the air miles shipping it from other countries to the UK. This is why British quinoa is a really great option. But if you're not keen on quinoa, you could have wheat noodles, you could even do potato wedges if you wanted to. Our curry sauce is cooking, the quinoa's been covered and it's on a lower heat now, so we're ready to do our katsu tofu. I've got my saucepan on a medium-high heat. I'm using rapeseed oil again, and I'm going to get my breaded tofu and just gently place that into the oil. And you'll know that it's ready because it starts to sizzle straight away. We're going to do 2 at a time. We don't want to overcrowd it. We don't want to take the temperature of the oil down too much. I think it's about time to flip our tofu. You can see there it's turned a really nice golden colour. Our quinoa's had 15 minutes. I'm going to take it off the heat and let that rest for a further 5 minutes. And our katsu curry sauce is now ready to blend. You can use a stick blender, or if you have a blender like this at home, that's absolutely fine as well. And this is the point where you will also season it with a bit of salt and a little bit of pepper as well. So now it's time to cut our tofu. Get a really nice crispiness there with the panko breadcrumbs. And we're going to assemble our dish. First of all with the British quinoa, and then we're going to just lie our tofu on top there. And finish with our katsu sauce. And of course, it wouldn't be complete without spring onions and a good helping of coriander. And here you have it, our sustainable tofu katsu curry.
Hello, my name's Raphael. I'm a dietitian community dietitian working in sort of East London. I've got a passion for sort of plant-based eating, and today I'm going to be cooking a sort of seasonal vegetable curry. So the first thing we're going to do is just prepare the dough for the flatbreads. We've got our whole wheat flour, so we've got 200 grams of that. We're going to add in sort of about half a teaspoon of salt. Then we're going to add the baking powder. Just give the dry ingredients a little bit of a mix. Make sure the salt's well distributed. And then we're going to add sort of equal volume of flour and yogurt. So we're doing 200 grams of each. That's probably going to make 5 largest flatbreads. So we're not sort of kneading this like we would do bread. It's you know, flour and a bit of yogurt, and it's just going to fry and puff up. So you're not worried about sort of gluten formation or anything like that really. So just as long as all the ingredients are sort of well mixed. All we're going to do now is just leave that to rest for the duration of the sort of cooking of our curry. Then we're going to roll them out at the end and then fry them. Using rapeseed oil, we can grow rapeseed in the UK, so that's part of the reason why we're using it. It's also really good for your omega-3, 6 and 9. It's low in saturated fats and is healthy for you, so it's a great one to cook with. So it's made more sustainable by using some creamy oat instead of using single cream. It's associated with much lower sort of carbon emissions using that product than your dairy. We know that dairy is sort of, from the evidence, is sort of second largest contributor to our greenhouse gas emissions. Once the onions are all sort of nicely cooked, we're just going to add in our curry powder and then stir that through a little bit, just coat the onions. If you want to have a bit of a kick and you want a bit of chilli, then add a bit of chilli. And so once that's all coated, then we start adding in our garlic and our ginger. And we can also add in sort of the first of our vegetables today, which is the butternut squash. So as I say, just swap around different vegetables. So you don't have to use butternut squash. You could use sweet potatoes, or you could use sort of new potatoes. Any starchy carbohydrate as a just to give you a bit here. This dish is going to be really high in fibre, and each of your vegetables, it's almost 5 a day in one dish. So just adding in the passata. It's just a little bit thicker than using stock, so again just trying to get a little bit of a creamy texture to the main base of this. Then we're going to add in our creamy oats. And then we're just going to leave that to simmer. You might want to give it a little bit of a seasoning to your taste at this point. So for the protein, we're adding chickpeas. If you're using dried chickpeas and you've soaked them for your sort of 8 to 10 hours, then check the packet for your cooking instructions. It's going to take a little bit longer to cook. And we're adding 500 grams of chickpeas. Per portion, it's about 100 grams. And that equates to about 7 grams of protein per portion. And lots of people would think that doesn't sound like a lot. However, sort of for the general population, some people have higher protein requirements, but for the general population, it's about 0.75 grams per kilogram, and that equates to maybe 45 grams or 55 grams of protein per day for women and men respectively. But there's lots of high plant-based protein sources that you could swap out in this dish as well. So you could use corn, you could use soybeans, you could use any of your beans and pulses really. There's a good alternative protein source. Total meat intake at the moment sits at around 108 grams a day in the UK. So studies have shown that if we can reduce this down to 50 grams of meat a day, so not cutting it out completely, but just reducing down our intake, then it can reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 39%. So now that's been simmering for around 25-30 minutes. So the butternut squash is starting to get a little bit more tender. So what I'm adding now is a little bit of mango chutney. So we want 1 tablespoon or 3 teaspoons of this, and then we're just going to stir that through. We're also going to add our kale at this point, and we just want to wilt that through. It doesn't need to be cooked for ever such a long time, but we'll just leave it then afterwards for maybe 5 minutes, just to make sure that the stems are cooked. So it can be a little bit messy, this bit, and I'll try not to sort of get it on the outside. So I've just rolled out the flatbreads. I've sort of split it into about five flatbreads, and that was with 200 grams of flour. Got a pan really hot here, and then we're just going to stick that in there. It's going to be a couple of minutes on each side. With the flatbreads, we used some wholemeal flour, but also we used the yogurt. That's a really good thing to include when you're moving to more of a plant-based diet, because removing that dairy from your diet, if you're following a vegan diet or you're reducing down dairy in line with current recommendations for reducing your environmental impact, is that what you're removing is the largest contributor to our iodine intake in the UK. So we need to make sure that that's replaced. And with products like that, so long as they're non-organic, is that they're going to be fortified with iodine. Check the back of the labels to check that you're getting one with a good amount of iodine. You also get some of your calcium, your vitamin D as well, which are all important. Swap out the different vegetables for lots of different seasonal varieties, and there you go. There's a easy midweek meal to have. It's high in fibre, low in saturated fat, and it's going to give you lots and lots of good nutrition.
Hi, I'm Sophie. I am a community dietitian from Leicestershire, and today I'm going to be cooking Singapore noodles and a blackberry and apple crumble with custard. So first things, we're just going to soak the vermicelli noodles for 10 minutes. You just want them completely covered. The good thing about these is that they're naturally gluten-free, and this recipe is really easily made gluten-free just by replacing the soy sauce with tamari. So today I'm cooking a plant-based Singapore noodle dish. It's got some British veg in it, it's got carrot, mushrooms and peas. I'm adding the mushrooms because these are actually one of the only plant sources of vitamin D. And lots of supermarkets now do versions which have been enriched with extra vitamin D, which is especially important as we're heading for winter and the days are getting darker and shorter and there's less vitamin D available from the sun. So first of all, I've just added some sesame oil to the pan. Now I'm adding some sliced onion. And now I'm adding in the carrot, and that'll take about 10 minutes or so just to soften and get it all cooked. There are lots of other seasonal veg that you could use in this at the moment. So for example, some leafy greens like kale, also peppers as well. Broccoli would be a good one to use. And this is a really good dish for sort of throwing in anything you've got at the bottom of your fridge that's left over. For me, I quite like to use broccoli stalk, and you can just cut it up quite small, add it to dishes like these, and it goes really well. It's also really good to use frozen veg in dishes like this, so things like frozen peppers and frozen peas. Lots of us have frozen peas in the freezer. It helps to reduce waste because you can use the exact amount that you want at the time, put it back in the freezer, and it's good for at least 10 months. We do know that food waste is responsible for about 6 to 8% of human-caused emissions, so reducing food waste is really important in trying to be more sustainable. So I'm just going to mix together a sauce for the noodles. So in here we've got 2 cloves of garlic, got roughly 2 tablespoons of soy sauce, but of course if you want this to be gluten-free you can use tamari, a tablespoon of maple syrup, and then the juice of a lime. So now I'm adding in my mushrooms, 2 teaspoons of curry powder, and a tablespoon of soy sauce. I'm also adding in the peas. I'm just going to let that fry for another 3 minutes and then we can add the noodles. So I'm just going to take this and put it into a bowl. And now to the same pan, I'm going to add the noodles and the sauce that we just made. I'm just going to fry that for about 2 to 3 minutes, and then I'm going to add the veg back, and it's pretty much done. Now I'm adding in the vegetables. So there we go, I'm just going to plate this up. I'm just going to sprinkle on the top some sesame seeds. And I've got some sliced chilies and some spring onion. So here we have our plant-based Singapore noodle fakeaway. So in here we have stewed apple and blackberry. They're both in season at the moment, and blackberries are really widely available, just any hedgerow really. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to sprinkle this crumble topping over. This is just a mixture of oats, a little bit of dairy-free spread, and some flour and sugar as well. And it's just a really easy British dessert. So in here we have some vegan custard powder. We're just going to add this oat drink, just a little bit at first to make a paste. So that's just 2 tablespoons of the custard powder, which is naturally plant-based, and then 500 ml of the oat drink. So oat drink is a really good option if you're trying to be sustainable, and we know from a lot of studies that it produces much fewer emissions as opposed to dairy milk. So this crumble is going in the oven for half an hour, and the custard is going in the microwave for a few minutes.